Welcome into College Football Breakdown with Joe Lisi. Joe, welcome in. How you doing today?
Looking for another great weekend of college football, Drew. Doesn't get better than this.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It was an exciting weekend last weekend. We got a good weekend coming up this weekend. And Joe, last weekend, hats off to you. You went 2-1. You lost in the Arkansas TCU game, but you won in the Georgia Notre Dame game and the USC Stanford game. Any thoughts on last week?
Yeah, I mean, it went exactly the way I thought it would play out. I thought it would be a high scoring game in USC as well. I thought the speed of USC on the perimeter would really challenge Stanford's defensive front seven and, more importantly, their secondary. Dynamic effort by the Trojans, but we'll see how they play against Texas this coming weekend, a rematch of the 2006 BCS championship game. And I was really impressed with the front seven of Georgia, holding Notre Dame to 3 of 17 on third down conversions, 55 rushing yards in that matchup. A dominant defensive effort by Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. And great call on that Georgia game. You actually called for the upset outright. So it was going off at about plus 185. But do want to make a note because I think it was my fault for not going into this segment saying, Joe, do you like the underdog with the points? I just assumed it for the first two episodes. And one of the watchers, he commented about your record. So do want to say one of the games you called in the past, you called for the outright upset in Georgia Tech week one, and they just had to cover. But last week you called for UGA to win outright at plus 185 dogs. So I just assumed that we were going from the point spread. In the watcher, I believe his name was Bobby or Bobby Brown, which we appreciate the comments, and we will keep record going forward. But so I think we're about even on that, but either way, going forward, we are doing it by the point spread. So Joe, we'll always go back to the point spread if you like a team or not. But let's get into the games. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, without a doubt, always have a great slate of action, under the radar games, not a lot of top 25 battles, but some solid action this coming weekend.
Okay, first game up, Joe. We got game number 155, 156. Big Ten versus SEC matchup here. The Purdue Boilermakers versus the Mizzou Tigers. 78 is the total, and it looks like Missouri open minus 5.5. Some money coming in on the Tigers. Missouri up over a touchdown now at minus 7.5. Which way are you looking to bet this one, Joe?
Yeah, I like Missouri in this matchup. A couple of factors about the Tigers entering this ballgame. They fired their defensive coordinator after 2 games. They lost that game last week after holding a 10-point lead against South Carolina. They lost that battle 31-13. They did not look good offensively nor defensively against an SEC opponent. They now stay at home and face an upstart Purdue team that has played very well now in 2 ball games. Purdue played Louisville very tough in that battle. They lost the first game of the year by 7 points, held the lead over Lamar Jackson, and they had a dominating effort last week at home against MAC opponent Ohio, 44-21. This is a Purdue offense that's averaging 150 rushing yards on the ground. Compared to last year, they only averaged 96 rushing yards per game. So they're a more balanced offensive attack with David Blau and their dual quarterback system. But defensively is where I have concerns for Purdue in this ballgame. They're still a Big Ten defense that cannot run sideline to sideline. And I think Missouri poses a significant speed advantage on the perimeter against the Purdue defense. Missouri, with quarterback Drew Lock, is averaging 383 passing yards through the air. They're running the football for 236 yards on the ground. And they have a big play wide receiver in Jamon Moore that I think could attack Purdue's secondary vertically. Purdue's allowing 300 passing yards entering this ball game. It is a road game for Purdue. And I look at a couple of factors for Purdue on the offense and defensive lines. Offensive line is allowing 5 sacks through 2 games, and they're not creating a lot of quarterback pressures. They only have 1 sack through 2 games. If Drew Lock is given time in this matchup, I think he could attack Purdue's secondary vertically, and I think the Tigers get a convincing double-digit victory over Purdue in this ball game. 48-28, Missouri dominates this ball game.
All right, Joe. So we got it. We have one shop on the SBR odd screen, Bovada hanging a -7, -115. So we can go on the Missouri Tigers -7, -115 at Bovada. And Joe, do want to follow up with a question because I've heard a lot of people in the industry talk about this total. We know Missouri runs up tempo. Purdue under Jeff Brom has brought over a pretty damn good looking offense so far. So do you think this number of 78 as the total is a little bit short?
I do. I thought last week the over would come in against South Carolina, but they were able to control the tempo. I think with this type of offense in Missouri going up against the Big Ten defense, there is a significant speed advantage, and I think Missouri will be able to put up points at a premium. So will Purdue, though, and I think that's the one thing that you have to keep in mind. With Jeff Brom as head coach, he's brought an offensive balance. When he was there with Western Kentucky, his teams passed for over 300 yards and rushed for over 200 yards with a running back named Anthony Wales. So I think Purdue's offense now averaging 150 yards on the ground, because there's offensive balance, you should see a lot of points. But I still like Missouri as the significant play in this ball game from a speed perspective. Keep in mind that Purdue was 1-8 in conference play last year, and defensively they allowed 238 rushing yards on the ground. To me, that's the difference. Look for big holes in the rushing attack by the Tigers in this ball game.
All right, Joe, great breakdown. In game number 171, 172, we got Army traveling to Columbus, Ohio to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. 53 is the total. Looks like Ohio State's pretty much laying -30, so laying over 4 touchdowns here. Are you looking to go with the military academy or going on the heavy favorite at home?
Yeah, I like Army in this matchup to cover the number, not win the game, but to keep this game a lot closer than 30 points against Ohio State. Ohio State's coming off a disappointing 31-16 loss at the hands of Baker Mayfield and Oklahoma. This is a defense now that's allowing 403 passing yards to opposing offenses. They allowed 386 yards last week to Oklahoma and 104 rushing yards on the ground. They allowed 490 to Oklahoma. They gave up 420 in terms of passing to Indiana week number 1 against Richard Lago. They now face a traditional triple option attack in Army. Army is 2-0, Drew, in this entering this ball game. They're rushing for 417 yards on the ground. You think that would play into Ohio State's defensive front seven, guys like Lewis and Bosa in this matchup? Ohio State's rock solid in run support, but this is a game that I think is a trap game for Ohio State. They're coming off a very disappointing loss at the hands of a top 5 opponent in Oklahoma. They now face a military academy. They're going to want to start fast in this ball game and really look to pound Army into oblivion in this ball game. But if Army starts fast, gets a methodical 8 or 9 minute drive and slows the tempo of this ball game down, that can really force Ohio State into an ugly type of game. And that's what I expect. I don't expect the fans in Columbus to be into this matchup. It's not a top 25 opponent. I think Army can run the football, keep JT Barrett on the sidelines, and get that offense into an ugly game. Ohio State wins, but it's a lot closer than people think. Ohio State 30, Army 14 in this matchup.
All right, Joe, liking the big underdog, the military academy. I like it. Also liking the Missouri Tigers minus a touchdown. So we got the nightcap here. Heading to the West Coast, we got the Stanford Cardinal traveling down south to take on the San Diego State Aztecs. Looks like Stanford's laying 9.5 or 10, depends where you shop. Make sure to check out SBR odds for the best number, and a total of 47 or 46, anywhere in between. So shop around on the total as well. But we got Stanford versus SDSU. Which way are you looking to bet this one, Joe?
Yeah, I'm taking the underdog, Drew, and I'm also going to take the underdog with the points and the underdog on the money line. You look at both of these teams; they're mirror images of each other. They should really play this game in a phone booth because their smash mouth style of offense and defense, in terms of a physicality perspective. I wasn't high on Stanford entering this year. I picked them at 7-5 overall, and I'm sticking by that. You look at their first 7 games last year. They were 4-3 after their first 7 games against opponents with a combined overall record of 57-34, which is a 626 winning percentage. When they had a 6-game winning streak last year, those came against opponents with a combined overall record of 27-46. 369. So in my opinion, they were a little bit inflated at 10-3 overall. They got exposed by USC and they got beat up on the offense and defensive lines. USC put up over 600 yards of total offense. They put up 623 total yards of offense, 316 through the air and 304 on the ground. They now have back-to-back road games and face another blue-collar offense in San Diego State. This is an offense in San Diego State that is averaging 277 rushing yards on the ground, and more importantly, their defensive front seven in run support is only giving up 50 rushing yards per game. I think they could force Keller Chris into third down and long situations and really force Stanford out of their game plan by stacking the box against Bryce Love. More importantly, look for San Diego State quarterback Christian Chapman to exploit Stanford's secondary off of play action. San Diego State has a very underrated running back in Rashad Penny. He broke out last week for 216 rushing yards on the ground against Arizona State. They beat a Pac-12 opponent, Arizona State, on the road last week, 30-20. I like Rocky Long as a head coach, and more importantly, I think the physicality perspective of back-to-back road games for Stanford is the difference. This is a high-scoring game, though. 37-34, San Diego State gets the upset over Stanford.
I like it, Joe. Going with the dog, the home dog. And Joe, I know you like him outright, so we get him a big plus number. But for record purposes, we will take San Diego State plus the points. So 9.5 pretty much across the board. Bovada's showing a 10, but I feel weird giving 2 plays out and taking the Bovada line. So we'll have to go with 9.5. But any closing thoughts before we close this out, Joe?
Yeah, a couple of games that are on my radar, Drew. I love underdogs this week. I really like Wyoming plus the points over Oregon, and I really like Vanderbilt over Kansas State. Kansas State was 9-4 last year. 8 wins came against FBS opponents with a combined overall record of 39-60. I think the physicality of Vanderbilt on the offense and defensive lines really is the difference. And keep in mind, Kyle Shermer last year only threw 9 touchdown passes. Through 2 games this year, Vanderbilt has thrown 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. He has a big play running back in Ralph Webb along with Carrie Blassingame. I think that's the difference. And keep in mind that Vanderbilt's defensive front seven is solid in run support, only giving up 59 rushing yards on the ground and only 105 passing yards through the air. I think it's upset city, baby. Vanderbilt gets the victory over Kansas State 28-24. And I will say this, one favorite I do like is Michigan over Air Force. I think the physicality on the defensive line going up against the triple option is the difference. Look for Michigan to cover the number against the Air Force Falcons this coming weekend in Ann Arbor.
All right, great breakdown, Joe. And find him on Twitter at @GoForThe2. We will be back next week with another college football breakdown with Joe Lisi. Thank you, Joe, and we'll see you next week.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.